welcome to this week's edition of Political Smackdown. I'm Andy Devin, I'm your host this week, and we've got our usual crew, plus one. Roger, good to have you back with us. Again,
always good. Always good to be here.
Permanent substitute. Betsy's out grandkidding somewhere. All right, let's get started. Well, folks, this past week, we lost two pretty well-known folks from Cleveland County. One is Don Melton, who has been a long time the chairman of the Cleveland County Water Board, and also Dee Freeman, who was a long-time Shelby city manager here. Two great guys. I mean, Don, he had cut my hair going back to I was probably about 19, 20 years old. And let's face it, guys, you always went, Cantrell Melton Barbershop, that became kind of the center for all politics, it seemed like, until the day that finally I figured Don was going to have to run sometime, so everybody keep coming in there to see him talking politics. But it's a great loss. Don's been in bad health for quite some time. Still is going to the barbershop at least twice a week, right up to the very end. But he will be missed, and leadership and the time he put into that water system, something else, Mike.
Well, you know, the only meeting in nearly 20 years he served on that water board he ever missed was the last meeting the week before he died, when he was at the hospital. So he was faithful. He's going to be missed. He cut my hair many times. Always wanted me to tell him predict who was going to win, especially in local elections.
Oh, I heard that too. Yeah.
And I never will forget, in 2016, Andy, he was absolutely convinced the polls were wrong and Trump was going to win, and I told him he was probably wrong. I didn't see Trump winning. I'll be danged if he wasn't right. He's a good man. We're going to miss him.
That's
Absolutely.
it. And talking about Dee Freeman, that was probably one of the biggest gentlemen I've ever seen. He was, even though he was a tall man, big man, but he was, as they said, like a gentle giant. And he was just such a great guy. I got to know him some while I was in the house, and he came pretty regular, and I watched his romance with his wife, Emily, just blossom in front. And she'd slip around and grab up all the ladies when we were in session, especially if he was there, and look up in the gallery and point, and they just giggle like a bunch of schoolgirls. But they were great. They're great people, and we will miss him with what he's done for our county, our state.
Well, when we interviewed Dee in 1994 to become the next city manager after Dave Wilkerson, he really rose to the top, and we unanimously agreed to ask him to serve. And Andy, that was before City Hall was remodeled. And we knew Dee was a younger man, and you could tell when he came dressed in that suit like he did. I mean, he had his initials on his shirt, he had his cufflinks. Yeah. We met him at the chamber, and we decided we would not show him his office at City Hall till he agreed to take the job.
Wise move. Was that when you had those old shag carpet and all that in there?
Yeah.
All right, guys, either one of you have anything else to add about either Don or Dee?
Just good men, and they will be missed.
Let me just say, he was an excellent city manager, and Shelby and Cleveland County, but especially Shelby, still benefits today from the 5.5 years he was here.
Well, he gave a lot to us, especially a lot of people didn't know Bev Perdue had him as Secretary of Health and Human Resources.
He went to Raleigh and served on as the Executive Director of the Triangle J Council of Governments. He retired, and then Bev Perdue, when she got elected, she appointed him to be Secretary of Diener.
I think both are prime examples of public service the way it should be. One in a paid role, one in an elected role.
Well, it was. They were two great guys, and they will be missed. There is no doubt about that. All right, moving on. This week, the internet partially crashed due to a glitch at Amazon Web Services, and most people don't realize that actually is where Amazon makes their money, not selling widgets and gadgets to us, Wes. They have such processing power with the computer system they had. They started selling it, or renting it out or leasing it or whatever to a lot of these other companies. It's really a fascinating thing to read about. But when you get down to it, you don't realize how much you depend on when Alexa doesn't work, when your bank, you can't get online to your banks, you can't do all this stuff. But my point with this, it seemed like this pointed out to our society just how we are addicted to the internet, and as part of business and everything else, it just encompasses everything that we do. And I thought that the Wall Street Journal had an interesting breakdown of it, and Wes, I attached it just for you.
Thank you.
I made sure I didn't put a link to it.
Thank you.
But let's face it, Wes, I mean, I don't see how we function anymore. When I started real estate in '90, we barely were on the internet. I think MLS had started, 2-3 years before then when it went online.
I'm not sure.
It wasn't long, but now we can't do anything without the internet.
Well, I do have a question for you. Since Al Gore took credit for inventing the internet, shouldn't we just blame him for this whole problem?
Or put him back in charge.
That would even be better.
Not do that. Essentially all the addresses got scrambled, so computers didn't know where to go and what to do. And they say the effects of this could cost upwards of hundreds of billions of dollars. But I think this points out very clearly, we've put so much money toward windmills that don't work and solar farms that are going to poison our landfills. This is the kind of infrastructure we need to be focused on, and it's obvious we're not focused enough on it because our economy, our country, individually, it becomes very difficult without good quality internet access. And when it goes down, like you said, everything from Alexa reading me the news in the morning to checking the bank or making a deposit or whatever, everything's off the table.
Well, Mike, it was interesting. I just finished a book about 3 weeks ago that was co-authored by Bill Clinton and James Patterson. And they were talking about something very similar to this very thing, where some terrorist organization had implanted some malicious code that had been doing it for a number of years, and it was in everything. And how that would affect the things they had to do. A great read if anybody ever wants to read it. And I know, Mike, you probably wouldn't want to read Bill Clinton, but he really was, it's a good book. Anyway, but what's your thoughts on this? I mean, I know you're a known Luddite and you don't believe in computers. You're still using stone tablets and chisels and hammers.
Well, I know how to use my computer and do a few small things, but I am a far cry from a computer/internet guru. Far cry from it. But Andy, I think this shows, as you were sort of alluding to, the vulnerability of the modern world to terrorism of this type. That could be a form of international terrorism.
No doubt.
And all I know, as far as you asked the question, sort of what can we do to avoid these train wrecks, I don't know how possible it is, but you think we need diverse options and backup systems of some type to pick it up whenever it, you know how you put all your information in the cloud now, so if your computer crashes, you can get your information back. So I don't know if that can be done, but I would bet there are a lot smarter minds than me, because this can stop commerce, it can stop news cycles from being, I mean, how do we mostly get our news today? It's mostly not on TV anymore, so it's a big deal, and I hope that the folks that are in places to, and these people, the Bill Gates that are coming on in the next generation, if they can figure out what he and Stephen Jobs and others figured out to get it going to where it is now, maybe we can get diversity and backup systems.
Well, that was one thing they did when we had supposedly the Y2K problem when we changed centuries. And who knows how many billions of dollars was spent worldwide because they was afraid everything's going to switch back to 1900 of all things. Yep. So I don't know, Roger. It's a scary thing to think about, and this is not to not take it seriously, but let's face it, when you're dealing with more than just teenage girls that can't get on their phones and do their thing, this is far more than that.
That's right. Snapchat went down, but it was more serious than that.
It really was, and I don't think we already know North Koreans have really worked on hacking skills. We know the Russians, the Chinese, right, and know what other bad actors that are out there. But this is something that could go down even as far as controlling our water system, our power system. I mean, everything is so interconnected.
absolutely. I thought of that old 1951 movie, the Day the Earth Stood Still. Remember that old black and white
Yeah,
thing? The
yeah.
flying saucer lands in Washington, and the spaceman, to get everybody's attention, shuts off all electricity around the world for 30 minutes. Well, cloud computing is the power grid of the 21st century, especially the 21st century economy. And when that goes down, our whole economy can shut down. That sudden outage, it was Snapchat and goodness gracious, everything, banks and all those things. that we
Facebook,
mentioned.
you
Yeah,
just name
just well, even the canvas at the school systems, they couldn't get homework turned in. Everything just got shut down. I agree with Mike. I think companies have to have backup strategies that they use. There have to be storage in different clouds. You don't put all your data in one cloud, and there has to be some sort of redundant architecture of people that are a lot smarter than us with this kind of technology, so that when one cloud goes down, another cloud is redundant and picks it up.
Don't put all your eggs in one cloud.
Don't put all your eggs in one cloud.
Or maybe get an angel to send it down
That's
to you
right.
when it does go
Because
down.
right now, there's just those three. It's AWS and Microsoft and Google, and that holds almost all the data around the world. And there has to be some diversification.
Well, I think so too, and it's a scary thing to think about. But folks, it just is unimaginable, really, to even consider that the internet could disappear like that.
And I think this, as the nation turns more and more toward AI, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Oh, that's all. We got to do a whole show on AI, but anyway, it's hopefully we can keep things on track now. But always beware, folks. Just remember, don't base your life around the internet, because it will crash at some point. Get a good book. I'm sure my printer friend would agree with that.
Yes, sir.
All right, moving on to the second question. We're probably not going to get this completely finished before break, but we can get started. Cleveland County School Board met this week for part 2 of their discussion about selling Marion School. What happened, and was the public a little confused about the nature of this called meeting? Roger, this was your bailiwick once upon a time, and you were there when Graham and Marion were closed, I believe, weren't you?
No, that happened after, but
After.
the discussion had started while I was still on the board, then it happened later.
But it seemed like people got really confused about what they were saying, that they thought the meeting was about reopening Marion.
Yeah, they did. And you know, neighborhood schools are loved by families that attend neighborhood schools. And whenever you close those neighborhood schools, it's an emotional strain. It was true when Dover Elementary was closed, whenever that was in the early 90s, and West Cleveland and Lattimore and Polkville and all those. The Board of Education, as you know, voted 6-3 to close Graham and Marion back in 2022, mostly because the buildings were old and in disrepair, and it was going to cost a fortune to get them up operational. And secondly, an extensive study showed that there was plenty of space in the rest of the Shelby zone. You didn't need those two schools. Marion, at the time it was closed, only had 188 kids in it. So it was easy to move those around. And as the old folks say, what was done, that was done and done. And the next question was what to do with the buildings. The county wanted Graham and took that. They didn't want Marion. And the board had been considering an offer from the One More, One Less, a Christian organization that facilitates foster care and adoption. Everybody agrees that's a good organization. But Andy, unfortunately, word spread in the community that there was a possibility of reopening Marion School as part of Cleveland County Schools. That wasn't on the table. It's not been on the table since 2022. And I don't know if it was misinformation or disinformation or a combination of both that got that word out there.
It was on Danny Blanton's table, though.
Well, it maybe so. But anyway, the school board met, and the meeting was to consider negotiations with One More and One Less and Working Preservation North Carolina. But as you say, a lot of citizens showed up thinking that reopening Marion School was on the agenda, and it just wasn't. Board voted 5-4 to enter into negotiations. I know the board, and you do as well, it's all Republicans, and that doesn't matter for these kinds of issues. The majority, I think, was trying to find a way to repurpose that building into a facility that would foster children and help families. And the alternative was not to reopen the school. That was never on the table, but that misinformation got out there.
Well, folks, we're going to take a break right now, and we'll come back and further discuss Marion School. We'll be right back.
Join us for our 23rd season of Armchair Quarterback on C19 TV. Each week we look at the 4A Burns Bulldogs, the 5A Crest Chargers, the 6A Kings Mountain Mountaineers, and the 3A Shelby Golden Lions. We will also discuss ACC, SEC, and Gardner-Webb football, along with the Carolina Panthers. Watch all season long on C19 TV or streaming online at c19.tv.
Cakes and cookies, toys and gifts, Christmas at your fingertips.
It's the shopping event of the season, the Southern Christmas Show, November 13th through 23rd at the Park Expo and Conference Center. Experience Santa's workshop, brimming with timeless childhood delights, twinkling lights, and festive cheer. Buy tickets at southernchristmasshow.com, courtesy of Kraft Body Scan.
Let's go to the Southern Christmas Show.
Welcome back to Political Smackdown. All right, Mike, you've got your part on Marion School. Seemed like that was a hot button issue. 16 people signed up to have their piece about this.
And I think 3 or 4 of them were supportive of why they were there. The others, more or less, talked about they were going to need more schools if they didn't keep Marion and reopen it now or later, and spoke in favor of opening the school, which I guess is sort of the source of what y'all are saying, is they were there for a different purpose than what the meeting was called for. But I'll tell you, Roger touched on one thing about the sensitivity of closing school in a neighborhood. And you know, Roger, the ones that closed that were older buildings that finally got a Union school in old county school system.
Yep.
And then the several that were closed, Lattimore, South Cleveland, West Cleveland, whatever they were named,
Yep.
got Bowling Spring, and old Bowling Spring. They got the new Bowling
And they
Spring.
got new
to
Bowling
put 'em
Spring
all
school, and
together.
then got a Springmore later.
One of the ways you get new schools is when you got old schools that are going to cost so much and your overhead is so much. I mean, like at Graham School and at Marion to a lesser degree, their utilities cost per student was $100 per student per year more at Marion, and it was like $300 or something like that per student more. That's just to keep them open because you had so much empty space in them at the
Well,
time.
another one we didn't bring up is the old Township 3 that was actually number 3 high school back in the day that finally had to completely renovate, just knock it down, start over.
But they did, you know, I'm sure they to some degree, I mean, y'all, I served 12 years, watched the way presentations are made. Their factual data was factual, but it's probably cherry picked a little bit, just to be honest about it. I mean, imagine such a thing. But, you know, for example, full capacity at James Love would allow 66 more students than they have today. Jefferson would allow 117 more, and Elizabeth 114. Elizabeth is by a wide margin the largest of the 3 Shelby's own elementary schools now in attendance and in target population. But I have heard and don't know that it's true that if you just go to K through 5, there's like 50 more students now than there were last year or year before last in those lower grades. But overall, the data they put out, 162 less students this year in Cleveland County schools than last year. So the overall trend is still dropping for now. And I think you're going to reach the height of what's called the COVID babies in the next year or so. And then it probably is going to go right back down as far as birth rate. Something about when people had to stay home under the Roy Cooper 888-day emergency order, that there must be more babies somehow
Well,
because
romance
of that.
bloomed evidently. But the other thing too, I think, is very important. People, a lot of discussions about all this quote new construction going on home. Just because a house is built does not mean there's a child in there.
And y'all, there have been a lot more houses built in Shelby, Kings Mountain, and other parts of the county in the last 5 years than in any 10 years over the last 25 before that. But how long is it going to last? The population growth is some, but there's going to have to be a lot of people move here from somewhere because we're not having enough babies to sustain all of this construction that is on the books that could be. Now, there's a lot still going on over there across from Shelby High School and DeKalb Street.
Oh, yeah.
Those apartments are being built fast in like triplexes or fourplexes. And I think they're going to be rental units, though. I'm not sure of that. I'm not involved in it,
I
but
think some of them are. Well, all I can say is all of us did our part. They tried to bring babies in the world, but I think those days are kind of come and gone.
I know mine are.
Wes?
Well, one thing I do think we have to take into account, there is a new K-3 public school in Cleveland, K-12 public school in Cleveland County that's absorbed some of this growth. And I do think that's a factor with this company, McMillan, Pasden, and Smith, multi-state company that came in and helped do this analysis. Yes, I'm sure some of it was cherry-picked. I can certainly understand people see the houses coming up wondering where we're going to put all these potential new students. But that decision, Mr. Harris, like you said, was made in 2022. This meeting was never intended to be a town hall, never intended to be a discussion about that. And I do find it interesting that Preservation North Carolina is going to be involved to help maintain, presumably, the historical significance of that school and that property, which I think is a nod to the public not wanting this just to become another new development. But I think we've got to give credit to the chairman and the past chairman when this first started on how this has been handled. It has been transparent, it has been open. The sole purpose of this meeting, as stated, was to be transparent. And they literally put off making the decision from the previous meeting, put all the information online, made it more accessible to the public before they had this meeting Tuesday night to discuss it, or Monday night rather.
Well, and there was a lot of concern that the first meeting really had not been publicized like they thought. And I don't think anything was intentional. You know, there's always conspiracy theories come up, but it just sometimes these things happen.
But it was published.
Yes, it was.
And as was this one, there was a lot of information online, but I think we've got to give the entire board, but certainly the leadership of the board, credit for the way this has been done over a 3-year period, not an overnight dark
agree.
committee room
Absolutely, and it
decision.
is a deep political hole. When you start closing neighborhood schools,
Oh, my goodness. Yes.
that is,
Certainly.
or redrawing district lines, those are tough.
But I think
And
these
this
are-
board took tough calls.
Yes.
Well, I think it is, and this is one of those things I wish we could get people would get their information a little bit clearer about what is going on. We're not reopening Marion School. That's been decided and gone.
That's
It's not
done
gonna
and
be
done.
it's not going to be relitigated. But you still had a right to come in and voice your opinion about the ongoing potential use for it in the future.
I'll tell you something else, Roger, you correct me if it's different for school board, but as I understand the general statutes, school board at either one of these specially called meetings for a specific purpose, we're not required to have a time for the public to talk. You just have to do that once a month at your
You have to do
regular
it
meeting.
once a month.
And so that was a courtesy that they extended to make sure people got to.
And the allotted time was also extended to
Yes.
ensure that all, I think, 17 people had the opportunity to speak.
Well,
A
the
lot
main
of time
thing-
is 15 minutes.
It's just people, they went out of their way to try to be where it was open, where everybody have their say.
Could have done like a speaker does in the House gallery. If you're unruly, we'll put you out.
There you
Not
go.
let anybody talk. That's what they do.
That's what they do. All right, well, hopefully this will be settled down. We'll see we'll keep following it, see what happens with it. All right, moving on next one. Mike, this is kind of up your alleys to expect. This week, county commissioners had a public hearing to talk about borrowing a whole bunch of money, it seems like, that finished the Justice Center and some work over at the landfill. What do we really know about this, and how was it received by the public?
Well, what we know is that we have known or should have known that this is coming for the last several years. Tim Moore got a little over $100 million of the Justice Center. The county had resources of about $25 million. I'm just speaking round numbers, but the total cost just slightly over $200 million. And the time has come when they've got to borrow $75 million to finish that courthouse and jail, and everything else that'll be there. They are now, because they approved it at this week's meeting, they are now on the local government commission's agenda for the November meeting, which I believe is on election day.
Wouldn't that be something?
And I don't think they'll have any problem. I think Cleveland County is okay financially. It won't cause a property tax increase because, here again, about cherry picking, when they did the budget, it's already baked in because they don't want to have to pass it and then raise taxes.
But
So
I think that the
already
biggest
done.
point I had about it was that nobody said a word.
That's right. I watched it and I was astonished. They're borrowing total $89 million and not a single, and it was advertised. They talked about it at the previous meeting. They advertised it like they have to in the paper, however, and nobody spoke about borrowing $89 million.
Who would have considered that? Wes, what's your thoughts about this?
I'm going to save Mike from one phone call. They didn't raise taxes. We went revenue neutral, so there was never a discussion about raising taxes to build this. The county
It's
has,
still baked in somehow.
the county has done away with a lot of the debt that was on the books. Good for
true.
them. The
That's
fact
true.
that no one showed up to speak, again, shows how the leadership and this board has handled this. It's been very open. There's no news here. It's all old news. Everybody knew this was coming. But credit the commissioners for putting off borrowing this money as long as they have, till it's absolutely needed. And look at what's happened to interest rates, thus our payments and interest payments for the next 20 or however many years this is going to take to
And
pay it off.
it's published in their documentation. They're going to get a loan from TD Bank. It was a low bid of at 3.8% fixed.
Can't beat that by any way.
Right.
Roger?
I don't have much to add. Public hearings at business meetings are like church meetings. People come when they're mad. When they're
Absolutely.
pretty satisfied, they tend to stay at the house. And that tells me that the commissioners had done a good job. They published what they were going to do. It was reasonable what they were doing, and the public stayed home because nobody was really mad about it.
Well, and that's good for our county every once in a while. Well, we're going to run to the lightning round real quick. All right, Wes, start us off.
Well, as a dazzling display of arbitrary economic policies and following the policies of the great economist Jimmy Carter, the president is now considering importing beef from Argentina to drive down hamburger prices and to shore up the Argentine economy. The administration's market manipulation will have devastating effects, will not make your steak or hamburgers any cheaper. In fact, will drive up costs long term as the supply of American beef dwindles and pests and diseases from Argentine cattle are introduced to our ranches. Andy, to make America great again, we must abandon the failed policies of Nixon and Carter and allow the market to work again.
All right, Michael?
North Carolina was the last state in the United States to grant veto power to its governor, passing a bill in 1995 that put the issue on the ballot as a constitutional amendment which was overwhelmingly approved by the voters. It restricted the scope of the new power, however, by exempting constitutional amendments, local bills, joint resolutions, and the electoral redistricting maps from the governor's veto pen, and it also lowered the threshold from the normal 2/3 to 3/5. The chief author of that bill was then State Senator, Democratic Senator Roy Cooper from Nash County, who lived to regret it, I'm sure.
It all comes around. Roger?
First, he put giant flagpoles on the White House lawn like it was a Buc-ee's, and then he cemented over the Rose Garden. Then he turned the Oval Office into a place that looks like a New Orleans cat house. And then he said his $300 million ballroom would not touch any part of the current White House. It is heartbreaking to watch a wrecking ball go to the East Wing. And if you think that thing is going to be built entirely by private money, then you probably still believe that Mexico is going to pay for that wall.
Well, when it gets right down to it, there's been a lot of changes going on in that White House for sure. And you stole my line. I should have given that to you.
I want to know if you fussed when Obama built a basketball court.
I wouldn't fuss if he built a basketball court.
Well, I think it's the size of it. It's always, as people say, size matters. Folks, that's all the time we got this week. Hope you learned something, and we'll be back again next week with a new edition of Political Smackdown.